Tonight we are going after one of the most dramatic star-forming regions in the northern sky, the Elephant's Trunk Nebula IC 1396 in Cepheus. Over 4 nights between October and November, I captured more than 13 hours of narrowband data from my fully automated home observatory here in Sweden. My name is Morten, and you are watching Frosth Astrophotography. This video will take you all the way from planning the target through the actual capture using N.I.N.A and then into PixInsight, where we'll process the data in SHO, the classic Hubble palette. I'll walk through the key processing steps in real time and run the rest as a time-lapse so you get the full workflow without a very long video. If you enjoy deep sky astrophotography and want to level up your PixInsight skills, stick around, there's a lot in this one. So let's start with planning. I always begin with Stellarium when deciding what to image. Let's search for the target IC 1396. I've centered on IC 1396 in Cepheus from my latitude at 63 degrees north. It rides quite high on the night sky during autumn, which is perfect. I had to image this object during the course of several nights due to the fact that it is obstructed by my observatory roof. I've loaded my telescope and camera configuration into Stellarium. With this field of view overlay, you can see that the elephant's trunk, this dark sinuous structure here, fits nicely into the frame with some surrounding nebulosity, so we're not too tight and not too wide. I've planned 4 sessions between October and November, giving me enough dark time and good altitude to reach around 13 to 14 hours total integration in SHO. Here we are in N.I.N.A, and first of all I'm going to connect all of my equipment that I will be using to capture this nebula. I'm using the Player One Poseidon M Pro monochrome cooled camera together with the Phoenix 7 position 2-inch filter wheel and the S-series 2-inch SHO filters. That is attached to my Skywatcher EvoStar 80 ED Pro telescope, and I'm also using the Skywatcher EvoStar 50 ED guidescope, all mounted on the Skywatcher HEQ5 Pro equatorial mount. I'm cooling the camera to -15. I also have the dew heater on and dew heaters on both of the telescopes, of course. I already prepared a sequence to capture this nebula, and this is modified for each session depending on how much time I have. You can see here that I have an obstruction in the form of my observatory roof that I will have to take into consideration. Limited to imaging this nebula from the time of darkness until late evening, I would say. So that means I have to do it in several different sessions. I use 300-second sub-exposures, that is 5 minutes, and for this object I'm counting on around 50 light frames each for the different filters. So in this section you configure the first filter, 50 frames, 300 seconds, and I use binning 1 and I dither for every frame. Then you simply duplicate that and you change the filters, so you will get 50 light frames for each filter. I also configure automatic meridian flip here. I want to slew to my target when the sequence begins. I want to center on the target coordinates that I've entered up here, and I want to start guiding. On start, I run autofocus, and I also want autofocus after each filter change. I rarely refocus if it's not going to differ a lot in temperature. I usually don't have a big problem with that here, but if I see that I will have a big increase or decrease in temperature, I might select the temperature change refocus as well. The acquisition in my observatory is fully automated. I usually open and close the observatory roof manually just to make sure that I don't have any mishaps with my telescope being parked or not parked, because of the fact that if it's not in the observatory park position, then the roof will hit my telescope if I close it. Before we jump into PixInsight, a quick look at what we're actually imaging. IC 1396 is a huge emission nebula and star-forming region about 2,400 light-years away in the constellation Cepheus. The elephant's trunk itself, this dark, elongated feature here, is a dense cloud of gas and dust being carved by radiation from nearby massive stars. To give you a sense of scale, the trunk structure spans roughly 20 light years. If we put our entire solar system inside it, from the Sun out to Neptune, it would be so small you wouldn't even be able to see it on this image. It would be smaller than a single pixel at this resolution. Alright, with that context in mind, let's turn photons into pixels in PixInsight. As I continue to use the Player One Poseidon M Pro camera, I'm more and more impressed with the quality of signal of this camera, as well as the S-series narrowband 2-inch filters that I use. Even though they are 7 nanometers, I'm really impressed with the deliverance of these filters. A fairly even distribution here with 53 light frames of HA, 57 of O3, and 52 of S2, giving me a total of 162 light frames and 13.5 hours worth of data. These are the stacked master light frames. I begin, as I always do, with the linear processing and a small dynamic crop. In this case, very small, because I gathered the data from sessions very close to each other. There's not much movement at all, so not that much stacking artifacts around the edges of the image. And I also started out with a rotation because I really feel that this rotation is the nicest, with the trunk down here to the left, and the rest of the composition is nice. Next step is to handle the background, and I actually used the automated dynamic background extraction script this time. And it's not that hard for this object because there's not much background. With this field of view, I have nebulosity, I would say, within 100% of the picture, so not that big of a difference. I also ran through the blur exterminator and the noise exterminator processes, of course, and then I ran the star exterminator as a batch processing job on all 3 filters. And this is the screen stretched H alpha starless. And with this image you can really see the quality of the signal with this camera and the filters. I'm really impressed with this. So next step is to do some stretching on these. I opted to use generalized hyperbolic stretch, as I normally do, to give me some more control over the actual stretching here. I start off by making a gentle stretched curve in the GHS, and then I simply execute that a few times, revealing the initial image here. And then I usually reset the tool, change to linear phase or mode, and adjust the black point. And then I identify different areas in the image that I need to stretch more. Very often it's the faint details that I want to stretch more, but it could also be the fact that I want to increase contrast in the areas with more highlights. The important thing here that after the initial stretch you will have to use protect highlights, so you don't overstretch the highlighted areas here, because that will not be such a good result. For the stars, I also use generalized hyperbolic stretch, but as you might have seen if you watched any of my previous videos, I simply put the local intensity to maximum. Then I simply stretch until I'm satisfied with the stars. I don't really like big stars. You can focus on a single star here to get the correct amount of stretching, depending on how big you want that. Maybe something like that. Then you simply apply this stretch to all 3 filters, and we will combine them later into SHO stars and calibrate them into synthetic RGB stars. Moving on to the non-linear phase, here you can see the stretched versions of my HA, S2 and O3 filters. I'm very pleased with the stretching here. I managed to reveal a lot of details without overstretching the highlighted areas in the trunk here, for example. I'm also very impressed with the signal quality of S2 and O3. Those are usually not anywhere near as close to good as the HA. In this case, I'm very happy with them to move forward. After the stretching, I combined the 3 filters using pixel math, adding the SHO into RGB channels, giving me the initial image that you can see on the screen now, the starting point for the traditional SHO Hubble palette. As you can see here, the colors aren't that great. We have an excessive amount of green here. There's also an amount of magenta in the middle that I don't like. Historically speaking, I would have used SCNR here to remove green and then inverted the image to remove all of the magenta. Right now, I don't use that anymore. I use other color correcting methods such as masks and curves and the script from the famous toolbox selective color correction, and that gave me this image that you have on the right here. If you want to see in detail on how you can do that, I do have a video on how to get the vibrant colors that you see here without using SCNR. I will link that in the description. Aside from adjusting the colors here, I also boosted the vibrance and saturation for different areas in the image, giving me this starting point. I ran through some sharpening just to give it a little bit of sharpness. We can compare. You can't see that big of a difference. That's just because I don't want to over sharpen things. But you can still see some sharpening going on. I'm a bit limited with my double glass telescope in the EvoStar. I ran through Noise Exterminator one more time. Maybe not even necessary with this image because I couldn't see that big of a difference. But then I added the synthetic luminance step. In this case, I used my H-alpha as the basis for the synthetic luminance. And this gave me a very nice increase in contrast and sharpness, as you can see here, without on the left and with on the right here. I really like to add this, giving the image a little more structure and depth and contrast. And then I opted to increase the saturation just a little bit more, and I also added a slight S-curve to the image here to get a good starting point for the next step, and that is to join this together with the stars. And that brings me to the stars. I took the SHO master light frames for stars, added them together in an SHO star file. Then I used the Astrometrics image solver to figure out exactly where this is in the night sky, and when that was completed, I used the spectrophotometric color calibration on the image, giving me what I call synthetic RGB stars that have as close to natural colors as you can get, I would say, without using RGB filter captures for the stars. There you have it, the final version of IC 1396, the Elephant's Trunk Nebula, and the 162 5-minute light frames, giving me a total of 13.5 hours of integration. I will say it again, but I'm very happy with the camera. Let's see if I can't swap out my telescope maybe for next season or in the future. I feel like I'm at the maximum clarity I can get with this telescope. If I want any more sharpness, I would need to swap out that telescope for one with some more glass in it. Just for the fun of it, let's compare some older versions of the elephant's trunk taken by me. So this was back in 2022 using my Canon DSLR, and yes, you can see some difference there. Then I upgraded to an astro-cooled camera, the ASI 294mm Pro, the year after, and that gave me this image. Then I used my latest and acquired skills in PixInsight, did a reprocessing of that image, giving me this last year, and now we are up to this image. And we can compare the first and the last. The first image taken here, 2022, by me using the DSLR, and the image on the right here with the Poseidon M Pro camera. Well, a bit of improvement if you ask me. So, with those words, enjoy these images. So that's the complete journey of the Elephant's Trunk Nebula. If you'd like to dive deeper into any specific step, check out my full PixInsight SHO processing tutorial linked in the description. If you found this useful, consider giving the video a like so more astrophotographers can find it, and subscribe for more deep sky imaging and PixInsight processing content from the observatory here at 63 degrees north. Thanks for watching, and clear skies!